Hello SGD, and here we are in Peru at Sacsayhuaman. Sacsayhuaman. All right, but how much do the heaviest stones weigh? So we're going to close up and just highlight. So we have three particular stones of interest, and especially the middle one is the one that gets the most attention. Here's the aerial view, and just to show that area, so it's right at the lowest tier where there's essentially three tiers. The lowest tier is where all the largest stones are, and therefore the heaviest, but how much do they really weigh? So for instance, Google Sacsayhuaman heaviest stone. Well, you tend to always get these pictures. You'll often see these in the videos as well, and but this is the largest stone. In the last video, someone suggested I name them, so we're talking about big stones. So because I'm going to call this one Cheech because he's a big stone. All right. You look up the stats, what the weights are, and you're going to have weighs up to 128 tons or tons, not specifying whether US or UK, up to 200 tons, so that's metric tons spelling. And you also have some are over 28 feet high, regularly estimated over 120 tons. So let's just check that out. And especially this one, the largest stone is 28 feet high and weighs nearly 200 tons, while the longest is 1,000 feet long. Well, that's a bit of a stretch, even at 1/10 of that. All right. So here we have the main one that's often photographed, mentioned, especially Lost High Tech type videos. This is calling this one Cheech, the big stone. All right. Now we have a guy there, so I'm going to estimate that he's 6 feet high, probably being, I'll be a little bit more generous when it comes to these things. So we can get stack him on top of one another, stack him across the bottom. So we get an estimate of the size. So it's 16.25 feet or 4.95 meters high, 16.75 or 5.1 meters wide. But it's not a perfect square. So I'm just using this checkerboard, 10 by 10, and with that, so without the correction, it would be 25.245 square meters, but approximately 90% of it should be removed. So that's putting it at 22.97 square meters. So let's just call it, round it up to 23 meters squared. And here we have that stone again, so 23 square meters. The important factor. Now look over the side here, and I've highlighted that. Well, so now we get another angle. So over here, this cornerstone. So again, thanks to David Thornley, who a while back sent me a bunch of excellent pictures from Peru. But there we have it as well. So here again, now we have that cornerstone. So what we are is we're looking along the top of Cheech. And I'm going to call this one Chong, okay, but we're looking along the length of Cheech. So just to show, there's this stone here and that one there. Okay, but notice there's a missing part here. Well, because this particular photo here is from Google Earth Street View, while this is a photograph from David Thornley. You get a lot of glitches, so sometimes they're funny, but you've got to pay attention to them. But that's in the lost middle technology confirmed, Sacsayhuaman. I did a video a while back on the LAHT using Google Earth, and you have floating mountains and stuff. So just it's excellent resource, Google Earth, but sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's not. You've got to really pay careful attention for glitches in the matrix. So here's a better Google Earth view where we can see it's being, we don't have that issue. There we have Cheech, 23 meters squared on the surface, and we have another big stone, Chong. All right, so now we correct those, and we see it's not it's the proper one. So this is the glitch, and now we see Cheech again. So remember, Cheech is running underneath here. Anyway, I got some just 23 square meters. So you can see the modern repair. Again, this is a modern restoration. This is not crude Inca restoration, because they couldn't build this. This is Inca. Let's not say that. Anyway, what's often described as crude Inca couldn't work stone, and they couldn't do this. Well, what this argument is flawed, because what they point to as firstly we have small stones underneath, so that it's on top. Well, what about other places like Ollantaytambo where you have them underneath? So that's a corrupted argument. And also that these places, as I showed in the then and now comparison, this is modern, not even restoration, preservation work. They're not trying to restore it, they're trying to preserve what's happening. But where we can see now, here we see this stone, and there we can see that stone there. And in the background we have a fellow walking, so I'm going to again assume that he's 6 feet. But because of the perspective, he's further back than what these stones are, so we're going to correct for that. So turn him sideways, so he's 6 feet. However, there is a perspective going on, and so what we have is that these stones, and I'll cover it more because I want to show you in coming up videos what they look like behind. So the stones are not very wide. So essentially what we have is the stones are about 1 metre wide along the length. So when you see these big blocks, such as Cheech here, well, he looks massive from the front, but think of it more as a slab, just like Baalbek. It's a really long, but it's relatively thin. So don't think in 2 dimensions when you think about weights of stones, because you have to know the 3rd dimension to get the volume, and then you can work out just how heavy they are. So 23, but it's 1 metre thick, based on the stones above. And again, I'll cover it more because there's a lot of good, the stones are not deep, the big ones. Now it could be, I'll come back to that in a moment, but based on the rest of the structure, they're not going to be very thick. So it's 23 cubic metres as well, because it's only 1 metre thick, approximate. Now, how much does limestone weigh? Well, 2,711 kilograms per cubic metre, so 2.711 metric tonnes per cubic metre. I'll link this video in the description. Ancient Architects did a series on Sacsayhuaman as well, and Geopolymer versus rocks. I'll come to this in a future video as well, because these were not cast. And you can rule that out as well. But I'll put that link in the description, because these stones, again, they're not andesite. Again, if you think Wikipedia even lists them as andesite, what they are is limestone, which is a much easier stone to work with copper tools as well. But that's not the issue for this video. Let's just get the weights of it. So granite, again, is slightly less in weight than what is limestone. So granite is 2.69 tonne per cubic metre. Limestone is 2.711 tonnes per cubic metre, but basalt is heavier than that again. But this is not granite, this is not basalt. These blocks are limestone, and they're also quarried from a short distance away. But they're uphill is the quarry, and about a mile away. So again, how did they drag them up hills? No, they didn't. They brought them downhill, and from a very, very short distance as well. Okay, so there we have Cheech. Well, Cheech the stone, not the person. All right, 23 cubic meters, 2.711 tonne per cubic meter. So we have 62.353, which is 61.36 UK long tonnes, 68.7 short tonnes in US. But just to show those, because maybe when I say tonnes, you're thinking tonnes and US versus UK. So let's stick with the metric, 62. But how did they move them? Okay, this is here are some old pics. These stones weigh more than 62 metric tonnes. And just back in the day, masons did this. I've did a whole bunch of videos of people move, even in like Sumba, people moving big stones with very much more primitive techniques than this, because it's the wood will support it. You can roll it. Moving a heavy object, and this is these blocks never had to be lifted. There's a difference between lifting 62 tonnes and moving 72 tonnes. The weight of moving something is all about friction, not the weight. Rolling anyway. So you only need a fraction of the force to move something, and these blocks never had to be deadlifted. They never had to be like lifted as a crane would off the ground as well. But anyway, getting off topic, let's get back to the weights. Now this cheech, which is often referred to as 130 tonnes, could be 132 tonnes, but then it would have to go over 2 metres back behind the wall, and that just doesn't seem to be the case based on any of the other stones there. Why that should be an exception, it shouldn't be, but let's carry on. However, cornerstones such as this are much, much heavier. And another important point, you put your cornerstone down and then you fit, so everyone focuses on, well, how did they, fit the other stones? Well, you would put your cornerstone down and then you use the smaller blocks. And as you reduce in size, the weight dramatically reduces. So these other blocks, with levers and just basic, people could move those stones, unless you assume that our ancestors were just absolute dunderheads and couldn't do anything. Well, okay, I don't live in that world. I know what people used to do, and so moving that type of stuff. But we come to the heaviest stones, and this is chong. So cheech the stone and chong the stone. Okay, so now we have this is chong now, a side, one view, and from this view we can see it from the other side. So with that we can start working. So this is again David Thornley collection of photos where I'm just going to compose these two pics together, because he's, even though he's off to the side, he's basically equidistant from the camera type of thing to that type of stone. So we can now assume that, sorry if you're shorter than Dave, I'm assuming you're shorter than 6 foot, but I'm going to assume that he's 6 feet and use that as a reference. And so again, we can work out the height, 20 and a half foot or 6.25 meters, and we can work out the width at 10 and a quarter feet or 3.12 meters. So we go to the side now. This guy in the yellow shirt and blue hat, again he's standing again from the camera the same distance, so we don't have to worry about perspective again. So we've got the measurements on that side. Now we look closely, and again another glitch in the matrix. The rope doesn't float, and this guy's leg is drifted off and his feet. Okay, but the photo's good, in the rest of it's in good enough detail, so we can, there's the glitches. And we can use that to work out that stone is, let's call that the depth of 9 feet or 2.74 meters. However, so that would make it 53.43 cubic meters. However, the stones are not rectangular, and so now I'm going to put, this checkerboard is 10 by 10, so I've shrunk it in, but we still 100 rectangles in each one. Did a reason, triple checked, so I'm pretty sure, there was some estimations done to make partial rectangles fit with the other, but we're looking at one side is about 80 out of 100, 20 being left, and on this side it would be about 15 out of 100 of those rectangles left. Split the difference, let's say it's 20% or 15, so I'm going to say it's 17.5% overall, which means we can reduce the, if they were blocks at those dimensions I showed, it would be 144.8 metric tons, but it's a little bit over 80% of that, so it's 119.5. I'm just going to round that off and say it's 100 metric tons. So cheech, which is referred to as the largest, and I don't know how deep it goes, but again, all of these stones here are on ground level. So why this one would be buried and the other ones, well, there's no good reason for that. So it could be a little bit heavier if it goes down deeper, but these are very close. There's always a margin, there's some estimation going on, but reasonably accurate. So we go back to this photo. So okay, we have 62 and 120 metric tons. Go back to this composite, and I want to highlight, and this is the unmeddled with, and I want to look at this cornerstone here in the back. The next one down. There it is, close up, because this one we can get a rear view, and I'll get back to this in it, but just in short, these were not cast. These are natural raw stones, because the smooth pillowed pattern on the well, that must be cast. Well, look at the back of the stones; they're rough as. This is not formed work. These were not cast, but you also get an idea of the shape. So turn that. Now if I invert that and put it over, you can see how that fits over. I'm certain that's the spot where it was. There's a few other clues in the background, but this is the rear view of this particular corner piece. But what's important is that behind this corner block, you can see it's rough. So it's missing volume. So on the outside, again, I try to make, working on, they're not rectangles, so you have to take away the curves and all those other features, and especially behind. I couldn't get a good photo behind of Chong, but based on the other ones, and I'll show more of those in the upcoming video, the rear of the stone's just, well, it's sort of rough, and they removing, the outside looks good, backside not so well. All right. So this 120 metric, so Chong could be less than 120 metric tons, because that back corner might be missing. And this is not just one example. I did a video series on LAHT Tambo, and so for instance, the largest of the monoliths, it gets overestimated in weight, 50 or 60 or even higher. It's at maximum prop 42, because when you see the stone from behind, you can see how there's basically a whole quarter is missing from there. On the outside it looks like a rectangle, all nice sort of sharp corners, but from behind it's missing a lot of volume, and that would take away from it. So this is not just a one-off, this is a part of the style of the architecture. What you see at the front, very nice. What you see at the back, not so well. So we go back to Chong, and he's about 20.5 feet, 6.25 meters. Here they say the largest stone is 28 feet high, weighs nearly 200 and ton. Well, forget this thousand. There's some typo, or I don't know what's going on there, but this 28 feet high number comes up a lot. So we go and zoom back and get an aerial, like a sort of semi-aerial view. That's Chong at 20.5 feet high, and along the whole length, they're all of the same height, and there's only a couple of like single monolith stones. So Chong and the one that I just showed you, the view from behind, the rest of them tend to be multiple pieces, or a large monolith but with a smaller piece on top. So no, none of them are 28 feet high. No, all right. But now let's look at, so there we have Cheech, there we have Chong, now we have this stone. So are there any nearly 200 ton stones? Well, there could be. So again, this is again Cheech. Now you can even see the pathway. There's a little entrance and a staircase that goes up to the second tier. That's the entrance point. Here is that stone, there's that staircase. You can see him going in and take a sharp corner. But okay, how big is this particular stone? This one might be a contender. Here's a top view of that stone. So it's got width, it's got size, and there we have a front view. So there's Cheech, there's Chong, and I'm going to call this one Dave's Not Here Man. Alright, so how's Dave's Not Here Man? Alright, zoom in a little bit. Bring the other pic over, and again you can see in the bottom corner how it looks from the top sort of down. So there's quite a bit of substance to this particular stone. Now there is a person standing right there, so we can use that as a reference, as a gauge, and I'm going to be very generous, and so just to highlight, it's the side view. So now we have a front as well. Now I'm going to assume that person was 6 feet, and I think I'm being very generous there. So again, we're going to be very generous. So it's going to make it about 15 feet high, 18.75 feet wide, and 10.5 feet deep, 2,950 cubic feet, or 83.6 square meters, cubic meters, sorry. Very generous, and again remember limestone 2.711 tonne per cubic metre. So this could be 225 metric tonnes. However, I think I'm being very generous here. Now here's a weird, now 2 dimensions, humans don't grasp 2 dimensions and 3 dimensions as visualising 3 dimensions is much harder than a line or even 2 dimensions. Getting area, anyway, a small change in dimension. So if I was to reduce, now let's take, how do I double the volume of something? So if I've got a 1 by 1 by 1 metre block of stone, but I want to double its weight. or essentially double its volume. How do I do that? Well, if I was to double its height and its width and its length, I would more than double it. For instance, the cubed root of 2. So if I, again, a 1 by 1 by 1 meter cube block, if I make it 1.25 wide by 1.25 high by 1.25 deep, I've doubled the volume. So only by adding 1/4 to each of the 3 axes, I've doubled the volume. So a small change, and I think I've very exaggerated the height, width and depth of this, would make a dramatic change in this. So I think, like, I'm being super generous. Could be as half of this weight that I'm showing here. So, but I just need to be a bit more accurate with that, but let's include it. It is a possibility in there because this person might be 6 foot there in the background, but highly unlikely. So it's all assuming that they're 6 feet. A small change in dimensions can, pardon the typo, cause a large change in volume and therefore the weight. But there's another issue with this particular stone because I'm not just by the erosion and the patterns that are in there. That's one clue. I'm assuming that this stone was moved. I think it might be actually a natural stone. Possibly could have been quarried and moved, but I think that this might be a contender for a natural stone because incorporating natural stone into architecture is just an Incan trait. Try and find somewhere that doesn't have it rather than look for a place. So here's a collection from the David, but again, I'm just going to show you some various photos from Machu Picchu, Tambo Moche, across the Inca Trail. The Inca always embedded natural stone into their architecture. It was just a common feature for them to do this. So again, so you see there, which is very unusual compared to any other civilization stone building one. They basically flattened the site and then built on top of it. But the Inca, for whatever reasons, not only incorporated it but sort of featured it as an important part of the building. So again, you can see just different examples bringing in the bedrock as part of the structure. Machu Picchu, so again, some people go, well, how did they move that rock? Well, this rock was this is what the Inca did, incorporated bedrock a lot. Again, you can see 2 examples there. That's just directly underneath this part here. It's at Machu Picchu. Again, you can see, I think this one is bedrock, but again, you can see it over here on the side. Again, people like these now, just the natural bedrock. Inca did it a lot. Again, find an example that doesn't have it. Would be everyone has it. There might be some places here or there that don't, but it's just a natural thing for them to incorporate natural stone. Just was their style. So, for instance, here, and this is a concrete block that was put in place. Now, while I'm here, you can also notice nice polygonal fitted stone on the outside, rough work on the inside. This is another, the nice stuff goes on the outside, and I'll come back to that as well because as a separate video. Anyway, let's keep going. It's again Tambo Moche, again including the stone in there. So that's what I think is happening in this particular stone. Also suspect, but because of the nature of the wear and sort of tear on this stone, but this might have been actually, that they've opened that up. Pure speculation on my part, and I'm only speculating that this was a natural piece. That it very well could be. Again, a bit more research required. All right, so we come back now a little bit further down where you see this amphitheatre. There is a large stone there, and I couldn't get the dimensions of that. That is a contender for being 200 tonnes. But these are ifs. But Cheech over here, he's not 130 tonnes. He's 62, and this one would be much bigger, 120 tonnes, depending on the back corner might be missing those pieces, like I showed at Alante Tambo, and so that could be even less. So before you so here's another view again. That's that entrance. You walk through the path and up the stairs. So Cheech 62, 120 is Chong, and Dave's not here, man. He might be 200, but he actually might waver weight of the earth, so to speak, because he's still attached to the bedrock itself. All right, so that's it for this video, but before we go into a little bit more detail and going through other features such as looking from the stones from behind and what's going on there and how they fitted them, essentially let's get a good picture of, okay, so just to cover it, the stone on the bottom, for instance, is fitted along the whole length, so that's fitted. But when they fit these stones together at Sacsayhuaman, the side joints are only very shallow, so you go back a little, so they might only be an inch or two or a little bit more. So that's okay, that's for the next video, but there's the weights, how we work them out. And you can apply these sort of, well, you know, once you get the idea, you can get the volume, whether it's cubic feet or cubic meters, and you can just look up what the stats are for the stone. And again, so often we've lost ancient high technology. It's overestimated, but also not to pick on them, but also in the internet, people see, oh, it's been referenced 2 or 3 times that this stone is 130 tons. Therefore, you know, but don't trust what you read on the internet, as they say. Who said, George Washington, I think, was the guy who said, yeah, don't trust everything you read on the internet. Maybe it was Gandhi, I'm not sure. Abraham Lincoln, no, that was him, yeah. And so there's the actual weights there, they're not insubstantial stones, but especially like the 62 tons. Anyway, more to come on this, but there's the weights, and once we get some of these basic sort of facts down and locked down, then we can move on to other questions. With that, SGD, cheers, have a good one, and more to come on this particular site, Sacsayhuaman.